Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Gavon. I am the co-lead for the BLACC ERG here at MSQ. Welcome to our Black Men's Roundtable, an event in celebration of Black History Month. On that note, I'd like to introduce our three panelists that are here. One to show up, I don't know where he is, but Mr. Charles Joyner, Clinical Program Manager, Mr. Gary Gravesandy, a Product Manager of the Digital Experience Team, and Mr. Rodney Miller, a Vice President for Security and Protective Services here for the Mount Sinai Health System. The fourth panelist is Garrison Red. He's a project manager for his Garrison Reed project here at Mount Sinai. Thank you all for being here, gentlemen. In a few words, would you please tell us about yourself and your role here at Mount Sinai, Queens? And we'll start with you, Rodney.
Yes, my name is Rodney Miller. As you said, I'm the Vice President for Security and Protective Services. I've only been here at Mount Sinai since September of 2023. Prior to that, I was the AVP of Security and Emergency Management at Inova Health System in Northern Virginia. And prior to that, I spent 23 years as an agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm glad to be here, and I hope I can add value to this discussion.
Thank you. Charles, you're next.
Good morning, all, and thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Charles Joyner. I'm a registered nurse/nurse practitioner. I've been with Mount Sinai Health System in the World Trade Center Department for 5 years. I've been a nurse for 20 years, and happy to be here. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of this panel.
Thank you. And Mr. Gravesandy.
Thank you. So as mentioned, Gary Gravesandy. I came to Sinai in 2019, actually, as a medical student. And I've been on the health system side since 2020, looking to increase equity in how we use digital tools across the health system. And before this, I was much more traditionally trained in research and clinical support as a medical assistant and research assistant. So been jumping back and forth between a few different contexts as I jump between the medical school and the health system side.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, gentlemen, we're going to go into our questions. Our first question is, in your daily morning routine, what steps do you take to get ready for your day? That's for you, Charles. Start us out.
Sure, absolutely. You know, for me, I like to start my mornings off with a calm and mindfulness. It helps me to set the intentions for my day, which way is going to go. Before joining on, full transparency, before joining on to the call, because I am the clinical manager of a clinical program, we had patients that were coming in, and with patients and with lives, it's really difficult to predict which way your day will take. So I like to start off with a calm mind, set my intentions for the day, read a passage from my Bible. That is something that I do every morning, and then meditate. And shortly after meditating, I usually go for a run. I start off my day in around 4 a.m. in the morning. It helps me to really get in the mode of things. Two things that I've also, throughout my clinical career, part of the research that I've done is around how do we reduce stress, right? And scientifically, it's shown that waking up earlier helps to start the day more peacefully. And that's through the exposure of the sun. It helps to enhance the mood. It helps to increase optimism. It helps to increase energy production, and it helps to stimulate the production of a neurotransmitter known as serotonin. And so just waking up early, most people would say that's going to make me more tired, but it actually makes you more productive. And what it does is it improves our sleep quality later in the day. It's something known as our circadian rhythm. And so that's the way that I start off my day. It certainly helps me also to connect more to community. I said I go for runs in the morning. And so in the morning when I'm running, yeah, on my way back, I'm seeing the communities getting going. I'm seeing the crossing guards that are helping young children get across the street for school. And so that repetition helps me to build community with them. I'm seeing the sanitation workers as they're making their routes, and you become familiar with these individuals that are part of your community. They become familiar with you. And so that is one of the ways that I start my morning. It feels that it helps me to be more productive, and it helps me to, when I'm present here in the clinic, that I'm present for patients and completely present with my patients that are here.
Thank you, Charles. Gary, can you go next?
Yeah, thank you for that start, Charles. I actually find it, in my own experience, sometimes very difficult, just to be honest, very difficult to maintain my morning routine. And that might be unique to me jumping back and forth, as I'll have some meetings that get scheduled at 7:30 a.m. and I likely will not be able to accomplish my regular morning routine at that time. But one thing I make sure to do, and the way I do it, is by incorporating my personal routine directly into my calendar, is hold myself accountable to still taking that time to dedicate to my own self-improvement later on in the day, rescheduling that time. So frequently before I did this, I would just call it a loss and move on. And as you might expect, there were more days where I took the loss than days where I actually got a win. So by actually taking the self-care time as a priority, even if you can't fit it into your morning routine, but fitting it somewhere else in your day and consistently and intentionally prioritizing your self-care, I can say, at least in my experience, that it's allowed me to, just as Charles was mentioning, stay attentive throughout the rest of the day. And even when times get difficult and hard, and there's a lot of deliverables or a lot of people expecting these different things, I know at the end of the day, even if I missed in the morning, that time is still there. I will still have that dedicated time to recenter myself on what truly matters in my life, the other things in life that I care about, before coming back to the world we have here.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to go into our next question. So our topic is resiliency, right? One definition is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, or threats, or even significant sources of stress, right? So, or the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. So the second question is, what has allowed each one of you to maintain your resiliency? Let's start with Gary. You can go again, please.
Sure. So when I came into Sinai, I came in as a student. So like the actual premise of meeting me was that everything was educational. So that kind of lowers the risk of not knowing things. But I frequently end up on projects, and when I moved on to the health system side, where I'm giving guidance in a certain area where I'm not personally the best expert on the entire topic, but I have expertise in some of it and can provide value. As a result, though, in order to even know how to articulate myself in these settings, I wouldn't be able to do it without mentors. I would not be able to do it without someone there who's willing to sit one-on-one and take the time to hear my story, I hear their story, and create a genuine connection so that we can talk the same language, so that I can bounce ideas off of them, so that we can plan realistically together. In every setting when I'm jumping back and forth between different contexts, I try and look for that person. I try to look for someone that I can identify with, or someone who can identify with me, is willing to take that time to really provide a foundation. And one thing I really want to get across is sometimes that person, many times now also, is a peer. It's someone that looks to me as a mentor also in a different context. So as you're navigating a new setting, more than likely you're not alone in feeling lost. More than likely you're not alone in faking it until you make it. And the more you can figure out who is with you and engaging with them, you'll be surprised how much easier things get for the both of you.
Great. Rodney, can you answer that question too?
Sure. Great answer there, Gary. Resiliency, it's something that it's funny, I teach my kids to be resilient rather than to be safe, right? Because resiliency is very important in today's society. And you have to be able to recover from the good and the bad and the ups and downs in life. And how do you do that, right? As Charles alluded to, body, mind, and spirit, right? From a body perspective, making sure you're exercising, making sure you're seeing the doctor on a regular basis, which is not common for us as African American men. But, taking care of the outer structure or our body itself to make sure that we're healthy and we're functioning as appropriate. Mind, continue to educate yourself, and more importantly, building great relationships. For me, my wife is a great outlet to talk to and to share issues that I'm dealing with. I have a great friend group with my fraternity brothers who may go crazy sometimes, but I talk to them and we share our struggles and our concerns, and just friends, within the community that we can kind of outlet with to have that discussion and really, express your frustrations and your desires and dreams. And lastly, for me, from a spiritual perspective, getting into the scriptures, getting in the word, going to church, and really kind of studying for myself and having that relationship or that personal relationship with God through your prayers or whatever that is for you, right? That helps me kind of deal in a kind of a world today where there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of meanness, and how do you persevere through that? So those kind of things kind of help me through that journey that we're living in today's society.
Excellent. I can relate. Charles, you want to take a stab at it too? How do you maintain your resiliency?
Absolutely. I certainly echo my fellow panelists, Rodney and Gary's words. It's individual. It's individualized for each of us, right? But it's oftentimes all of those things that each of you have said. And I wholeheartedly echo that. As I mentioned before, my walk is certainly with God. And so daily it's those intentions, is what Rodney mentioned a moment ago. It's getting into my word and seeing how that speaks to me from day to day. It's different each day. I may read the same passage and then it speaks to me different a different day, and it's what Gary said as well. It's finding community. It's finding those that are for you, right? And how do you build with those true and honest relationships to help you to move forward? We as a people, it's really important, especially during Black History Month, that we speak about that. That is really the way that our people have survived, right? It's by communities, by resiliency. It's by coming together as community. It's by knocking on your neighbor's door and saying, can I borrow a cup of sugar today? We don't have it. Right. And that neighbor is saying, absolutely. Right. And it's building in those moments. And that's how our people have always gotten along. And so those old ways, they still are fresh and new today. And it still holds true for me as well.
Thank you. Great answers, guys. Our next question is, what were your challenges in your career? It's a three-part question. How did you adjust? And what were some of the results? Rodney, can you take that question first?
Yeah, thank you, Robin. So as I was thinking about this question, I kind of thought back to my FBI career. When I joined the Bureau in 96, there were about 11,000 agents in the Bureau. Out of those 11,000, there was only 400 African American agents and 100 were women. So you can imagine, even though I was in the room, right, I didn't necessarily have a seat at the table, right? And, we've all had that experience where we walk into rooms and we're the only person of color in that room, and we're really not sought out for our ideas or our suggestions or what value we can bring to the table. But what I kind of learned through that process, right? My parents were kind of migrants from the South during the 60s. My mother came from Tennessee and my father came from North Carolina. And the old adage is true. As an African American, you have to work twice as hard as others to get the recognition that others get. I think, if you kind of put your head down and remain true to that, but also, you know, maintaining your character and your integrity, you know, you will build a reputation that kind of precedes you, right? And then that will open doors of opportunity for other things down the road. And as I tell a lot of young men, Black men in particular, you have to be patient sometimes. I think we're in a society where we want to accomplish things overnight. We see others doing great things, but everyone's plan and purpose is different. And sometimes we just have to be patient and wait for those right doors or those right opportunities to open in order to be successful. I think in my personal experience, I've walked through some wrong doors just trying to get to the top of the food chain, and then I was miserable, right? But as I become older and more patient, it seems like the right opportunities come to me, and then I can kind of pick and choose my pathway forward. So that's the advice I would give to most people. And really, I was a former military as well. And they, one of the adages we had was NCOs get promoted based on what they do, but generals get promoted on their reputations. So if you have good reputations and people value you for what you're able to do, like I said, doors of opportunity will open up for you and you will get those chances to do great things.
Excellent answer. How about you, Gary?
That was a really great answer, Rodney.
Mhm.
On my end, the biggest challenge has always been navigating uncertainty. And some of you might actually resonate with this, but I frequently find myself in a situation where, not intending to be, I'm pioneering through a situation where I go back to my family and friends and ask for guidance, and unfortunately, they just don't have it because they haven't had that experience yet. I feel like as I'm going into different settings and then have my Thanksgiving dinners, there's just not much that I can lean on in order to be able to navigate this uncertainty. So for me, trying to push through this, I've had to do a lot of extra, or at least in my head, it seems like extra legwork, trying to just understand the setting I'm in, understand the people in that setting and how they got there, understanding how that world works. If you've ever done research, you'll know that that's a setting where things work a certain way. People have certain responsibilities and have certain motives that if you don't understand it, it can be really abrasive. And you'll feel very, very restricted in what you have control over. But as you learn more about what all of the people value in that space, you get more and more freedom to do what you wish. And that theme I found is true across settings. The more and more that I was able to take the time early on and during whatever time I'm given for onboarding to really build those genuine connections that Rodney and Charles were referring to and highlighting, the more likely I've been able to push forward my initiatives and the things I care about. because I could tie them to the values of the people around me. So that's been true across most settings. Has been a challenge, I will say, that continues, but one that gets easier over time.
Thank you. Charles, can you go take a step there too?
You know, I think that, Brother Gary, you know, I really appreciate just how vulnerable you're being in this conversation that we're having here. I think that many of us have had those questions. And so something that you mentioned was pioneering, right? Like you being the pioneer of something. And oftentimes that is our experience. We're stepping into it. Brother Rodney mentioned we're the first or the only person in the room that resembles ourselves. And that can be uncomfortable for us. It often is. Again, I said that I'm a registered nurse, right? I went to college in Boston, and I have to say that at the time when I was there as a Black male registered nurse student, I certainly was the only one. And it was difficult. It had its moments, right? But something that came to me as you were speaking about that, two things, Brother Gary, was how important mentorship is, right? How important that is for individuals that are going through something. Someone else likely has already walked the footprints in the sand in those moments, right? And we just have to tap into that. And we are doing that often. But the importance of mentorship for those who are on the line, I would say get involved. I have mentees. And I really do speak with them so that they can see what some of my struggles have been coming in as a pioneer. And the next thing that came to my mind was that you belong there, that you belong, right, Brother Gary? And so you're not in that room by luck. You know, you're in that room because you've positioned yourself to be in that room, and therefore you belong, right? And so that chair, if it's not pulled up to the table, you know, I don't want to misquote that lovely quote, but essentially, let's find a folding chair and pull it on up to the table, right? Because, you know, it was your hard work that got you there. It's our hard work that has gotten all of us there to the table. And so as we're sitting there, we shouldn't have that imposter syndrome that's going on, right? You know, we've worked to be there, we deserve to be there, and we have something to contribute, you know. And so that has, as I'm saying this, I'm also preaching to myself, right? Because that's often my experience. And it helps me to get through day by day. So thank you for sharing that.
These were excellent answers. Thank you so much. Our next question is, for each of you, what would you like your legacy to be? It's still here, okay? What would you like your legacy to be? Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm mute. I'm mute. Did you guys hear the question?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm gonna start with Rodney. I'm sorry.
Thanks. You know, I kind of thought hard about this question. I think, you know, Charles kind of hit it right on the head, right? Being able to help someone else. I think a lot of times as African Americans, when we do get a seat at the table, we are hesitant to bring others with us. So I think my legacy, what I would like it to be is, you know, being able to bring others with me, providing others with the opportunities to have a seat at the table and to be promoted. You know, a lot of times we're hesitant to do that because we don't want to seem like we're being favorites towards anyone or trying to provide unfair opportunities towards anyone. But if you look at the world today, that happens every day, right? So if you have an opportunity to help someone that looks like you know, I would definitely reach out on a limb and do that. And to Charles's point, you know, being a mentor, being able to share those experiences with others. As Gary said, you know, we're the pioneers that are navigating areas that, you know, I was going to say Black folks haven't been before, right? You know, we're sitting in positions that people that look like us haven't been before. So we are the pioneers. So we should be the ones providing that, that advice and guidance and value to others to understand, once you get into the door, these are the things that you need to do to be successful. And here are some ideas and suggestions on how to do that.
That's great. Gary, you want to go?
Sure. I've been, as someone still forming his career, thinking about this a lot. And right now, where my head has been is I find a lot of value, and I get a lot personally whenever I help mentor someone else and they actually achieve something great. Like, even more so than my own accomplishments, when I know I took a little part of someone else's success, for some reason that builds me up so much more than my own steps forward. And as a result, when I think about the legacy I want to leave, I really hope people look at me as an ambassador for their own success, connecting with people in a manner that they'll know when they come to me that we'll grow together, and we'll meet some people along the way and grow together in that way as well. I know as long as I'm on this earth trying to accomplish things by myself, I'll never accomplish as much as I could as if I brought my entire group with me. So as I think about legacy, I truly think about having a legacy of ambassadorship.
That's awesome. Okay, Charles, your turn.
I love all the answers. I
They're
really do.
great. They are great.
And as Brother Ronnie said, it's really difficult. I've thought long about this one. And what I've come to is that my story is still being written, right? But what wakes me up in the morning, perhaps that's the answer that I can provide, right? It's really to try to position my family, friends, those around me to be in a slightly better place. To leave my community, that community doesn't just mean where I go home to after work, but all that that my hand touches, in a slightly better place than the way that I received it or I entered into it. And I think that if I'm able to do that and be successful at that, then I would hope that those around me would say he lived a good life. He walked a good walk.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, our next question is a little deep here. What is your definition of racism, and how has it affected you and made you grow? Rodney?
Great, thank you. I know this was a tough question for the entire group. And I want to kind of be a little kind of provocative here. So, and probably treading into dangerous territory as well. It's funny, when I was a grad student, I kind of wrote a paper about this, in my kind of presentation, I talked about how, racism is an issue, but it's not the issue that's truly holding us back, right? And I think it bordered us more on white supremacy, right? That is the real issue that holds us back as a people. And when that is weaponized for political reasons, that leads itself to institutional and structural racism, right? Or the barriers that prevent people of color from moving up the chain, right? Because the white supremacist ideology is that they are being displaced by minorities and immigrants and people of color, and they want to hold on to that power as long as they can, and they flame the worst intentions of those around them to kind of believe in that. And that situation allows those people to put up barriers for the success of others. So I think, unless until we really attack and really deal with the issue of white supremacy, I think that is the core issue in American politics and in American society today that is really kind of pulling us back as a people collectively.
See, very good.
Sorry, I didn't hear who you were speaking to, Robin.
Gary, you next.
Oh, okay, lovely. So I'm not going to attempt to create the most comprehensive, accurate definition here. Instead, I'd like to share the most helpful one that I've received from some of the older men and women in my family that were trying to guide me through it.
Mhm.
And that racism is synonymous with ignorance.
Mhm.
The reason why this has been the most helpful definition for me is because it's been the most solution-oriented definition when I'm in the moment experiencing something.
Mhm.
If I'm experiencing a moment where I feel like someone or I am being prejudiced or, and like I said, ignorant, the solution for me has been to teach, has been to learn, has been to figure out what one of us isn't getting or communicating
Mhm.
that pushes us to a new level of understanding.
Mhm.
So for me, going into different settings, if I hear something that just doesn't jive well with me, if I see something or feel a certain way, I look to learn more about the process. And sometimes I don't fix the racism in the system. I don't. But I
Mhm.
end up learning enough about it to get around it or pioneer around it.
It's a great
But yeah.
answer.
Mhm.
Charles?
You know, I certainly, I haven't thought about it the way that the brother Gary had thought about it, and I do like the answer. I don't think that I would add more to this topic, this conversation. I think that I really want to sort of ponder over that answer that you gave. What I really appreciated about it is that it's solution oriented. And that's something that your family had mentioned. And so, Robin, I'm going to pass on the question. I do see that there are some questions that are coming in on the webinar chat as well.
Robin, you're muted.
Read the questions.
Of course, I think it's statements rather than questions.
Yeah, there are a lot of statements. Okay. There's one regarding, I'm gonna read it. It says, I find that many African Americans specifically hold themselves back because of past experiences. Many Caribbean people from elsewhere in the African diaspora don't have that cloud over their heads that African Americans do. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, so I see Mr. Cross. Thank you for your statement. I would say, I don't know. My family I'm both Caribbean and African American. My mother's from Guyana. Um, I was born shortly after she came here. My father, he's American. And so, and when I say American, from the South. I think that our people have had some very traumatic experiences, regardless where we're from and where we located and situated, settled down in the world. But I also go back to one of the questions that we had not long ago, which was about resiliency. I think that we are resilient people, regardless where we are. And because of that, our culture goes with us, but also our resilience goes with us. I know that our ancestors also go with us. I think that sometimes what people are seeing as African Americans holding ourselves back, I think that that's something that may be an adage that was just put out there,
Hmm.
right? And over time, people began to just repeatedly say it, and so began to stick on us as African Americans. But in fact, that is not true. In fact, we've actually built largely what you see here in our nation of the United States. Right. And so I would push back on that. And I would say, I would encourage you maybe to just give some thought to that one as well. I think
Mhm.
that we as a diaspora, something that you used in there, as an African diaspora, are resilient people. And we're beautiful people because of that resiliency.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Charles. Hi, Garrison, how are you? Thanks for joining us. This question that we have is the last question. I'm gonna ask you actually the, the number two question. Um, how has how do you maintain your resiliency?
You're still on mute, Garrison.
For those of you who do not know, my name is Garrison Red. I'm the Mount Sinai Spinal Cord Injury Outreach Coordinator, but I'm also a Team USA Paralympic powerlifter. When I was 17 years old, I suffered a gunshot wound, which left me paralyzed from the waist down. It injured the T12 section of my spine. And when I was in the rehabilitation center, I seen individuals that never had the opportunity to run, never had the opportunity to walk, play football, play basketball. So throughout my career and throughout my life, since my injury, I always wanted to defy the odds or the limits of what a person can do. And we all gonna come to adverse situations where our resiliency is the only thing that will push us through, carry us the way where we need to go towards our aspirations. So I think my resiliency was developed through the adversities that I've went through when I was young, 17 years old. So with that, you build upon it as you accomplish different things throughout your life, throughout your career. You start to become more resilient. You start to become stronger. You start to make decisions that take you outside of your comfort zone, or you put yourself in positions where you might not be 100% comfortable at the time. But that's what life is about. It's about learning and persevering with whatever you have.
Thank you so much. Actually would like to ask you also, um, what were some of the challenges that you had in your career and what adjustments that you made?
So being a Black male and being a person living with a physical disability that everyone can see, I had tons of drawbacks. I always had to be on time. Punctuality, I had to realize, was just as important as actually being able to carry out the job duty, because people always felt that I would be the most needy person in any environment that I went into, when that wasn't totally the case. So, some of the things I developed, because of my disability, which helps me today is punctuality, responsibility. Sometimes you have accountability. Um, I don't ever place blame on others, with even people with more ability than me, because, if you want to compete at any level, it doesn't matter where you come from. You just have to be able to carry through with whatever you have, whatever you're able to do. And that's one of the things that propelled me to help me get to where I'm at. Is I never looked at my disability as something to hold me back. I never looked at the color of my skin as something that will hold me back. I just knew the odds, and that I may have to work hard. I may have to prepare a little better than other people.
Excellent. We have a question in the chat. It says, Mr. Randall says, or I don't know if it's Randall, Jordan Randall says, who are some of the mentors or mentees who have been most influential or impactful on your journey here at Mount Sinai or externally? Any one of you could take it.
I would like to take a stab at it. One of the best bosses I ever had in a one-on-one, he asked me, Rodney, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right. And I was kind of dumbfounded by that. You know, you thought I was just going to discuss work and the projects that we're dealing on. But he truly took an interest in both personally and professionally developing me. And I use that to this day. That happened over, I don't want to date myself, over 30 years ago. And I still am impacted by that question. And when I meet with my direct reports, I ask them the same thing, right? Because that proof shows that you are generally vested in that person's success. And you will get them to wherever they want to go, regardless if it's still within the organization or somewhere else. You want to have that, like Gary alluded to, you want to see that other person grow and develop into the best person they can be, and you want to be a facilitator for that.
Anyone else?
I'd highlight two individuals that I've had at Sinai. On the medical school side, as far as being someone who wants to get more involved with more than just the education, Dr. Gary Butts was, again, I'll take one of the quotes that I got from him, the way you just did, Rodney. He would always encourage me in a situation to think about it, think what it could be, think of all of the different options it could be, and say it's that and more. Meaning, no matter what I'm doing, it's everything I can want it to ever envision it to be, plus more, and always pushing me to fight against that diaspora we were talking about earlier of pulling me down or underestimating what I can accomplish in a space. That's one person. Another person I'd like to highlight is when I first came in, my first manager was Rachel Tornheim. And I've never had someone dedicate so much one-on-one time on the side just to teach me how to communicate in this space, just to teach me the ins and outs of the space. And these are two individuals that I'd say have been the biggest mentors in the last 5 years for me.
That's great. We have another question in the chat. Okay. It says, can you share how you handled a situation when it was either direct racism or inequality? Any situation, how you handled that? Garrison?
So there's been multiple times I was in predicaments or situations where I encountered inequality. But never at Sinai, thankfully. However, when I used to work in the financial world, it was a lot of inequality, and you can sense the inequality from, just the environment or atmosphere. With that, what I would encourage anyone to do if they experience some form of inequality is if you can, try to remove yourself from that particular organization or that particular business. But I know that some of us are not in the position to do so. With that, there's staff that you can report to. So there's always human resources, because no one should be in a environment where they feel as if, there's some type of prejudice. I try not to work with individuals that have somewhat prejudice or, some type of bias towards, certain people. However, with that, you have to speak up. You have to advocate for yourself. If you see something that you don't like or don't agree with, there's nothing wrong with, stating how you feel, especially if it's within the lines. And then, yeah, sometimes you have to make, someone aware of the situation that you are experiencing, because if you don't say anything, it'll just get swept under the rug.
That's great. Anybody else would like to take that question? No? All right. So we've done all our questions. Do we have anyone who have other remarks pertaining to the topic of resiliency? They'd like to share any resources or organizations or other avenues where there's support for individuals?
Well, feel free to connect with me. I'll leave my Instagram, social media information. That's always a great place to connect.
Anybody else?
I guess there's one other thing that I like to bring up whenever I'm in a resiliency talk. As we discuss the value of resiliency, I would caution you to not always approach a situation as one where you must be resilient. I find a lot more times, a lot more frequently now, I'm looking for opportunities to make situations more and more feasible so that I need not be resilient in the future. Or I approach a situation asking either during or at the end, if it's appropriate, whether or not it had to function that way, so that when I or another comes to that situation, they may not need to go through the same thing I had experienced at the time. So as we leave this discussion, I would like at least some of the group to also think about the situations they enter and see if there's anything they can do to make it such that resilience may not be necessary and we can get back to doing the great work we love to do.
And the only thing I would add, you always should be growing and preparing yourself for your next opportunity. Don't remain stagnant where you are, particularly in places that are not nourishing you or growing you. You should always be looking towards your next. And who knows what that next will be, but you should always be preparing yourself for that next opportunity.
Absolutely. I'll add on to that with, if we're talking about resources to share, excellent resource is the Diversity Council, right? Mount Sinai, our institution is large. And so at the different campuses, I would certainly say avail yourself to those councils at the different institutions, at the different facilities, and because they're doing great work. Our ODI department is doing great work. And so those are really great opportunities for your voice to be heard, for work to be done, for change to occur as well. And as I said before, mentorship is really important. If you're not a mentor, someone out there needs you. And so I'll recommend looking to becoming a mentor.
That was excellent, guys. So on our closing remarks, I'm going to say that resilience gives us the strength to bounce back from challenges in life. And each one of you has addressed their own journey so eloquently. So I'd like to thank you for your time and participants, and to everyone in the audience. We hope you enjoyed attending our event as much as we enjoyed putting it together for you. And stay resilient. Thank you all.
Thank you, Robin. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone on the panel as well.
Okay, thank you. We're done.